on history because the subject of my story is a very popular subject, a subject that has been told throughout many different cultures, all through all across the country, and that is of the mermaid. So the mermaid was, you know, a lot of times when we think of mermaids today, we think of happy little Ariel, and we think of mermaids as being friendly and always welcome little creatures. But throughout history, it wasn't always seen that way. A lot of times, you know, from times of sailors sailing across the ocean, if they saw mermaids, it was a kind of a sign of bad luck ahead, stormy, treacherous weather coming, and so they were often seen as bad omens. And so the story that I have chosen is called Suki and the Mermaid, and this story in particular has its roots in the southern part or southwestern part of Africa. And then the story kind of carried on through the Caribbean islands and went into even the sea islands of South Carolina. So this story began in an area called the Karoo. And the Karoo is an area that's separated into two different sections. The Great Karoo, which is in the northern part, and then Klein Karoo, which is Little Karoo. Now, if you visited this area, you can see that it's a semi-desert area of land, and so it was kind of strange for people to see about, you know, why would stories of mermaids even come out of this area? Because there's not a whole lot of water, and being that it's a lot of desert as well. Let's see. But at the base of a lot of the mountains, you can see there were wonderful cave systems that went into the mountain rocks. And so there was a lot of stories and tales told through the people, the Khoisan people in particular. They are also known as the Bushmen. And so this is their region of land. And inside these caves, there would be beautiful stalactites, stalagmites, almost magical looking caves and caverns. And on these walls would be paintings, ancient paintings of part human and part fishtails. So it was kind of strange for people to think, okay, if I'm here, you know, where do these stories come from? Because the ocean is far, far off. And so here's the story of Suki and the Mermaid. Okay. I guess we can leave that there. All right, Suki and the Mermaid. I want you to imagine the sea islands of South Carolina. Had beautiful palmetto trees, big, huge, live oaks and waving Spanish moss. And there was a little tiny cottage way out on one of the islands. There was a rickety little shack, and in it lived a little girl named Suki. And Suki lived there with her stepfather and her mother. And you know, when she was really, really young, she lived happily there, but her father had died, and since then her mother had remarried, and she called the man, even her mother called the man Mr. Jones. Nothing that was real kind, nice. He was kind of mean. And so Suki, when her mother had married him, you know, began to not enjoy herself so much. She even felt like her mother didn't care too much about her, because Mr. Jones, all he ever did was put her to work, scrubbing, you know, the clothes, scrubbing the dishes, and he would also shove her out into the garden, where she would have to hold onto these hoes and begin to work and get out all of those, all of the weeds out of the garden. And so she would often be out there, and Mr. Jones would be up on that porch saying, "You get to work out there, Suki, and don't you stop." And she would be holding there, and she'd be getting sores all over her hands, and she'd be just out there digging and hoeing, and she began to sing, "Mr. Hard Times, since you come, my ma don't like me, my work is never done. Mr. Hard Times won't do a lick. See, just say work faster or I'll beat you with a stick." And she would have to keep working and working and working. But every moment she was imagining, if I could just get away I could be okay. And so she was always looking for just that one moment to slide off. And she was out in the garden in the hot sun, and Mr. Jones had turned off and went into the cabin. She was like, I had enough. And she threw that hoe down, went running as fast as she could. She went running and running and running. And she had her own favorite hiding place that she would run to. She would run past those beautiful tall trees and waving Spanish moss, and she would run through there until she would come to the edge of a white sandy beach. And she would just sit there. She'd take off her big long hat and sink her feet down into the sand and just sit back. She would just relax. And for some reason, as she was sitting there feeling a little bit of breeze on her face, she began to just have this tune in her head. And she started just humming and singing. Thee down below, come to me, Mama Joe. And the song kept going through her head. And she just sat back and just kept feeling the breeze. And pretty soon, the breeze started getting stronger and stronger and stronger against her face. And she opened her eyes and noticed the waves were getting a little bit bigger, a little bit taller. And she saw, all of a sudden, this beautiful lady comes up out of the water. And she was kind of scared, and she kind of sat back into the sand. And because she had heard stories about mermaids, where she saw this beautiful dark-skinned woman with a long fishtail, and so she was a little scared because she had heard stories that said that, you better watch those mermen because they'll grab you and pull you under and you won't ever come back up again. So she had stepped back and was kind of afraid, and she just kind of stared off at this mermaid. And the mermaid just kind of looked at her and said, Suki, I came because you called me. I'm here for you, and I want to help you. So Suki wasn't so sure. But she gradually warmed up to the mermaid, and she started talking to the mermaid. And she was feeling comfortable, and she started talking and telling the mermaid about how she can't swim, but someday she just wishes and hopes that someday she can get away and go to the mainland, maybe Beaufort or Charleston. But she wasn't too sure that would ever happen. And the mermaid said, well, I will help you. And she said, but I can't swim. And the mermaid said, well, I'll help you, I'll teach you. She still wasn't sure, but all through the rest of the day, she talked and had a wonderful time with the mermaid. And all of a sudden, she stood up and thought, the sun is about ready to go down. I haven't finished all my chores. I'm going to get beaten. My steppa, he doesn't like it. I'm going to get hurt. I'm going to be whipped. And the mermaid just said, don't worry, Suki. And she dove under the ocean water, and she came back up holding a beautiful golden shining coin. And she handed it to Suki and said, take this. And Suki grabbed it in her hand. And she was kind of nervous and still thinking that she's going to be in big time trouble. And she said, go ahead. So she grabbed onto that coin. She went running as fast as she could because she knew she was going to be in big trouble. And as soon as she got to her little shack, she opened up the door, creaking in there. And of course, when her steppa and her ma has seen him, immediately they start yelling. Look, Suki walks up. She goes, and they just stop. And they stare and look in her hand. What is that? And she hands it to them. And the ma holds it, and they look at each other. Suki, where'd you get this? Oh, I just found it along the ocean, along the edge of the water. And they took it. Well, Mr. Jones, he was only thinking of himself all the time. He thought, well, we know what, Suki, you're going to do this. You're going to go there. You're going to go there, and you're going to find more. So he had already planned that that's where she was going to go. He was going to send her out, and she would have to find more of these. Well, she was relieved because, yes, now she wasn't in such trouble. And she went off to bed. And so she was kind of happy now that she would get to go back and see the mermaid. So that was right at the break of dawn. Instead of being shoved out into the garden to hoe and do work, she ran off through the beautiful, beautiful palmetto trees and off to her private little area of the beach. And she began to sing that song again that called the mermaid. Thee down below, come to me, Mama Joe. And the wind picked up again, and the waves started getting a little bit higher. And here the mermaid came up out of the water, and she was so happy to see her, and she had a chance to just play and enjoy with her all day long. And the mermaid taught her how to swim, and she was so happy. And so she would go off swimming through the water, And this happened a day after, several different days, until finally, at the end of every day, the mermaid would go under the water and would bring up a gold coin, and Suki would grab onto it, and she'd take it all home, and as soon as she was there, of course, her steppa was there to grab onto that money and take it. But she was fine with that, because she was okay, and she would be able to go in for the night. Well, her mother had been getting very curious about, where is she getting all these? So one day, her mother began to follow her. When Suki got up and got all ready, and she went running off through the woods, and she got to her private place where Ma wasn't too far behind her. And she followed her to that private place, and she was peeking out over the grasses, and she saw Suki go up there and sing this tune. Thee, thee, down below, come to me, Mama Joe. And her Ma just kind of peeked up over the grass, like, what is she doing? But she sat there and just hid. And before she knew it, she was amazed when she saw a beautiful mermaid come up out of the water. She was shocked, and she stepped back. Oh my goodness, what is that? And she saw and watched her all day long, and she was amazed that Suki could now swim. And she was amazed at the fact that this mermaid was being kind and friendly. Well, she immediately and then at the very end of the day, she also saw the mermaid hand her one of these golden coins. Well, she quickly backed off and ran back off to her husband. And she was telling him about all the stories that she had saw that day, and how her daughter, Suki, had come across this mermaid. Well, Mr. Jones was a selfish man, so he immediately thought, we need to get that mermaid. We can get lots of money if we can capture her and take her in and sell her in the mainland. We can get lots of gold coins for that. So they had made plans that before the break of dawn, before Suki got up, they had left the little rickety shack and went on their own through the forest and past the Spanish moss, and they got to that private little beach area. And they had hauled in a boat, and they had a little tiny boat, and they got in there. Mama was behind, and old Mr. Jones was there with a big giant fish net. And he said, sing it, go. And she began to sing, thee, thee, down below, come to me, Mama Joe. And they were looking for that fishtail to come up. Well, the mermaid, of course, she came because she heard the song, her call, and she came up out of the water, and as she looked, she saw this big giant net above her, and immediately frightened her, and she went running or diving down as deep as she could into the water, and she got away. Well, Mr. Jones was hollering at that Ma, it's all your fault, and they were arguing and fussing, and then they were blaming each other constantly. Well, when they had gotten back to their rickety shack, they didn't say anything to Suki. Suki woke up like normal and went on to her normal part of the day, thinking, oh, okay, I get to go back to see the mermaid. And she gets to the edge of the sand and sings her song. Thee, thee, down below, come to me, Mama Joe. She was looking, nothing. She sang it again. Thee, thee, down below, come to me, Mama Joe. But she never came up. Suki was so sad. She said, what did I do? She lost a friend, and she just went back home. Well, the days passed, and Mr. Jones knew that mermaid wasn't coming back because no more coins were coming. And he put her back to work, and she was working in that garden again and again and again, over and over, having to scrub the dishes. And it got to the point that Suki wasn't getting enough to eat because they didn't have a lot of money. She was getting really, really sick because they just worked her. And so she got to the point where she was just laying in bed and couldn't hardly get up. And she was so sad still that her new friend, the mermaid, wasn't coming back. But as she lay there, getting really, really sick at night, the mermaid came to her in a dream. And the mermaid said, Suki, I can help you. I will come to you one more time. If you come to me in the morning and sing, I will come one last time. And so Suki woke up in the morning wondering if that was even true, but she pulled herself out of bed, and she made her way through the forest into her own special place by the sea. And she sat down. She tried so hard to sing that song. Thee, thee, down below, come to me, Mama Joe. Well, immediately the mermaid appears, comes And she was so happy to see her, and the mermaid said, "Come with me. I have a private place under the ocean that where no hurt, no pain, no hunger is ever going to get you again." So Suki got up, and the mermaid grabbed her, took her in her arms, and wrapped her sea green hair around Suki's face and mouth, and took her deep under the water. And they went to these underground caverns or caves. And when she came up, Suki began to feel a lot better. And she lived under that water for a long time, and they enjoyed each other's company, telling stories. Suki would often tell her riddles, and the mermaid loved to try to figure out these riddles. But Suki began to get, even though she was glad that she was feeling better, Suki was missing her home, listening to the sounds of the birds and feeling the breeze on her face. And she started to tell the mermaid, "Mama Joe, I'm missing my home. I'd like to go back home." And the mermaid said, "No, you can't go." Well, Suki began to cry, and she cried, and she cried, and she cried. Well, the mermaid started feeling really sorry and really sad for her. She said, "Okay, I'll tell you what, Suki, if you can come up with one riddle that I cannot solve, then I'll let you go back home." And so the mermaid, so Suki began to think really hard, and she thought, okay. She began to tell her last riddle. "There's something that walk all day, but come night, they sit under the bed and rest." And the mermaid thought and thought and thought. She said, I don't know that one, Suki. I guess you got me. What's the answer?" Well, it was a pair of shoes. And Suki had picked that one because she knew the mermaid didn't have any feet. So the mermaid sadly said, "Okay, Suki, I'm going to take you out. But I must warn you. I must warn you that time has gone by. You're not a little girl anymore. You're grown up. You're a beautiful woman. When you get back home, things are going to be a lot different. There's going to be a lot of men who come and they want to marry you. But I will tell you this: don't take just anyone. You wait for a boy called Dembo." She thought, okay. And so then the mermaid took her, held her in her arms, wrapped her hair around her face, and took her back up to the surface of the edge of the water. And Suki was so happy to be home. She went running back, and she got back to her rickety cabin, and she opened up the door, and her mama quickly saw her, and she had been missing her so much, and gave her hugs and was just crying. Well, Mr. Jones just kind of stood off on the back, and he tried so hard to pretend that he was crying. But see, the mermaid had given Suki something to help her when she returned. She gave her a bag of golden coins, all for her, and jewels. And so Mr. Jones had seen it, and he was trying hard to pretend that he was crying, but he couldn't get anything out. He was just thinking, "Oh, how can I get that for myself?" So so of course then the days passed, and of course there ended up being a lot of suitors who started to come to the house asking to marry Suki. And Suki remembered the mermaid's warning, Dembo was who she should accept. And so all these men kept coming, "Oh, I'd like to court you," and she kept saying no. But one day then there was a man. He wasn't quite as handsome as everybody else, but he came to the door, and he saw Suki and said, "Suki, I'd love to marry you if you accept me. My name is Dembo." And she immediately thought, wow. She looked at him really closely, and she thought, yeah, he's not as handsome as all the others, but she looked deep into his eyes. He has a very kindness about him. He's very gentle and calm. And she liked what the mermaid had chosen for her, or who she chose for her. So she said, "Yes, Dembo, I will accept you." So then wedding plans were being made, and they were all gathering things together, and the wedding was supposed to be the next day. Well, Mr. Jones had different plans. He snuck up behind Dembo one time and smacked him in the head with a big, huge stick, and he fell to the ground and died. Well, Suki, then he also went and grabbed up the treasure of the gold coins, and he ran off and hid them under his mattress for later plans. Well, Suki ended up finding her poor Dembo, And she was so brokenhearted. She quickly stood up, and she knew he wasn't alive anymore. And she just ran as fast as she could through the forest, past the Spanish moss, and she ran to her private place, and she quickly began to call, thee down below, come to me, Mama Joe. And she just kept humming and singing, and before you knew it, the mermaid came up out of the water. And she begged the mermaid, Mermaid, Dumbo, he's gone. I need my Dumbo back. And the mermaid said, please, just come with me. We can get away from all of this. And she said, no, I just want Dumbo. I need my Dumbo back. And so the mermaid said, just wait, Suki. And she went under the water, and she came back up holding a beautiful, round pearl. And she said, take this, Suki, but just know that you'll never see me again. So Suki grabbed the pearl, and she grabbed it in her hand. She went running back to the little shack. And as soon as she got to where Dumbo was, she placed that pearl right on Dumbo's lips, and he immediately woke up, and he began to tell the story of how Mr. Jones had hit him, and he ran off and he stole the treasure, and he was running. Well, Mr. Jones had been standing back thinking that no one saw and didn't think that he was going to come alive. So he grabs the treasure, and he goes running through the forest, goes past all the trees and the long gray Spanish moss, and he gets there, and he had already set up a little boat. He jumps into this boat and goes running off and paddling as fast as he can while everyone else is coming through the forest trying to chase him and catch him and stop him. But it was too late. He was already in his boat, and he was rowing out to sea, and he was so happy that he got away with this treasure. But before you know, everyone else has stopped thinking, oh, it's over. Storm clouds start coming in. The breeze starts picking up and blowing so strong. And the water, it starts building. Huge waves start building and crashing. And before you know it, a huge wave comes tumbling over the boat of Mr. Jones and gulps him and covers him, and he goes sinking down under the ocean. And then before you knew it, the sun came out. The storm clouds cleared, and everyone just started walking back to the cabin or to the little shack. And even though Suki was upset and kind of sad that the treasure was gone now, at least she had her Dumbo. So the next day, she and her husband, who had just now gotten married, they went out to her favorite place, and she sunk her feet into the sand. And as she's sinking her feet into that sand, she feels something. And so Dumbo and Suki begin to uncover, and they pull out this treasure, this bag of all the gold coins. And before she looks out into the water, and the sun shining on it, she sees a few gleams of glittery green on the tail of a fish splashing, and sees a golden shine of a comb, and she knew that it was the mermaid.